when Katrina hit in '04, they opened up that door for the internal stuff, FEMA, right? So Blackwater was helping in Katrina under FEMA contracts. And then they've just slowly gotten their foot into the point now that it's permeating everything. You have private military contractors at federal buildings. Remember the riots in like 2020? Ton of private military contracting jobs, because what they did is they took the federal agents and they started swarming them to like federal buildings. And then who took over for those federal agents? Contractors. Mm-hmm. And the whole concept of contracting is you do it when you need them and then you downsize. That just shows me that in the last 20 years, there's never been a conscious effort by the government to say, we need this many people. We have to hire them. We have to train them. We have to do it.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We got a special guest today, Morgan Lerette, Girls, Guns, and Greed. You've been on before, but we're going to talk about some other stuff today. What's up?
What's happening, Dan?
Well, you said living the dream already, so I can't say it now. Which, by the way, is
just
always
living
a lie.
my best life. It's like going to a P. Diddy party, you know? It's just all lube and baby oil.
Just get lubed up and fucking slide right down the hall like risky business, right?
That's how you do it.
Yeah, fuck yeah. What have you been up to lately?
Nothing. Just working for the man. That's what happens. You go and you become a contractor, and then you go and you start working for the man at some point, I think. No, I mean, you got your hard AF seltzer, so
yeah.
You probably don't have to work for the man as much, but you probably work harder than the man, though.
Yeah, I do, but I do also get to not just occasionally, but frequently tell the man to go fuck himself, which is nice. So positioned pretty well, so far as I can tell. We'll see. Maybe there's something coming that I don't know yet, but between now and then, I'm going to talk a lot of shit. So we were talking the other day, and it's come up since the inauguration and even before, but you and I have been talking about it for a long time. I've been talking about it on this show for years, since 2020, about organizations like MVM Inc. and Southwest Key Programs and all sorts of others, NGOs. It's now coming into focus with Doge finally. It's weird how trafficking children never alerted anybody, but spending money on it is become the problem. Like it took Doge to fucking finally make this a spotlight issue. But before we get into that, give us for people who haven't seen your other episodes on here, tell us who you are, what you've done, and so on, all that.
Yeah, I'm kind of a big deal in my own head. So no, so I was one of those guys that just kind of lucked into working for Blackwater. I joined the Air Force in 1999 before the wars kicked off, and then I had a buddy. He went to go work for Blackwater. So once I got done with Blackwater, I went and joined the Army as an intel officer, did 13 years in the military, 3 years in Iraq. Got to see it from like literally the ground offensive all the way to when we were leaving in 09 and 10. And anybody that was there during any of those time frames knew it was an absolute shit show. But I ended up writing this book, Guns, Girls, and Greed, because everybody thinks they know what Blackwater did. But it's really the dudes on the ground, right? It's like listening to the generals talk about how we won in Iraq, and then dudes like you and I that were on the ground are like, there was no winning at all. We were just kind of like hanging on for dear life.
I mean, we won all the gunfights, but that doesn't amount to shit, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, dude, you can win a million battles and lose a war, and I think we've proved that over the last 20 years. Yeah. So that's the weird transition, is that when I released the book, I went on Facebook, you know, because that's where all the old contractors go to bitch and complain. And they had all these wonky, like, job postings for going down to the U.S.-Mexico border. Look, dude, when I was over in Iraq, I thought when Afghanistan, Iraq ended, the contracting stuff would end, right? That's the whole point of contracting. Like, Walmart hires contractors around Christmas because you need people, and then when you don't need them, you let them go. So I thought contractors going to be done, and then, dude, it's just gotten bigger and bigger. We got contractors in Gaza that just came out a couple of days ago. We got contractors in Ukraine, Israel, the U.S., dude, you name it. If there's like a department that's somewhere, we have contractors there, and it's big money, man.
Yeah, I mean, I've been telling people this lately because, you know, pretty much any time a new Republican administration, now this is a unique one because Trump's a madman, right? and you know, in good ways, in my opinion. But anytime a new Republican administration comes in, or they take one or both of the chambers, you'll hear a bunch of talk about the welfare state and overspending and blah 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 and all this shit. Man, you could take social welfare spending for the last 25 years, and I don't know that it would cover 2 years of the DoD budget, right? And when I say DoD budget, I don't mean paying soldiers and shit. I mean the military-industrial complex has siphoned more money out of this country than anything ever. More than pharmaceutical, more than welfare, more than anything. Nothing else is even close, right? It's not even fucking close.
Dude, they've been really good at expanding too, right? Mm-hmm. So it started with the DoD, and then it turned into Department of State, CIA, NSA, like anybody that has anything that might be happening overseas, like the government contractors just lick their lips, right? It's just it's almost become one of those things like Pepsi owns Taco Bell and Long John Silver's and all that. Dude, that's what contracting's become. It's become a conglomerate of these dudes that say, oh, I can do intel, I can do logistics, I can do private security, if there wasn't big money in it, you wouldn't have all these sweet companies like Constellus and MVM, and the new one is UG Solutions. That's the one in Gaza. Who the hell's even heard of these things, man?
I mean, some shell corporation will stand up a new company under its umbrella and deploy a bunch of assets. I don't know how they're getting clearance, right? To me, you would think that to get government clearance, you would need to very conspicuously post your executives and board of directors. They have to go through clearance processes. I mean, shit. Even at Black Rifle, our C-suite had to go through a clearance process for a couple of things, right? For certain contracts that we were doing, and it's a fucking coffee company, for Christ's sake. I'm sure they're going through some clearance process, but the fact that there's no transparency on this stuff is just
dude,
wild.
I honestly, I'll push back. I don't think they are. Go to UG Solutions, where you have your laptop.
I'm looking at their website right now, and it's just a contact sheet.
Nothing.
There's literally nothing on here.
So what they do is they spin up these LLCs, and then they put themselves in for an RFP, right? Mm-hmm. And then they say, hey, you're going to win part of this RFP. Now you need to go out and be able to get 50 or 100 people to do this. Now, all those people are also independent contractors. They're not employed by UG Solutions. So now all those independent contractors would, in theory, have to go through that security clearance process. But dude, it is purposely convoluted and complex to make it difficult to track. And that's really like with the sex trafficking of kids. That's what they've been doing for the last 20 years, man.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute, because it's big business. And it's been reported by, like, I've done a lot of it. The New York Times has actually done a big story on, I think in 2019, on Southwest Key programs specifically. But it seems to, anytime it pops up in the media, it gets hushed up pretty quickly, and then it gets bigger, right? Like,
yeah, dude, I've done 2 articles on it, and I can't get it picked up by the mainstream media, literally going through the entire supply chain. And the problem is that you're going from a nonprofit down at the U.S.-Mexico border, then it's going into the Border Patrol, which is DHS, that then goes into Human Health and Human Services, and under that there's ORR. Like, I could dig into it, but at the end of the day, it's exceptionally complex and convoluted, so that you can't figure out who the heck is doing it, right?
Well, let's go through it. I want people to hear this shit.
Okay.
Go through. So tell me what the let's stick with just unaccompanied minors for now, since we've spent I think, like, what I can't remember the name, like, or the number. It was like $90 billion over the last 10 years on that, or some shit. Like, it's a crazy amount of money, right? And all of that money is going to, like, some of it is going to HHS and ORR, the Office of Resettlement, right, to put people places. But I think the majority of it is going to contracting firms to move them around, to find them in the first place, and all this other shit. So let's start from the very beginning. There's somebody in... first of all, who is it that are sending their unaccompanied children into this fucking country in the first place?
All right, so there's 2. There's the smugglers, and then there's the cartels. So there's parents there, dude. I don't blame them down in Colombia that say, hey, take my 6, 7, 8-year-old, get them up to the United States. Hopefully they'll have a better life. So that's going to go through your smuggling chain. Then there's also reporting that the cartels will go down into South America, grab kids, and then take them to the border. And they're two separate business models. And that's what this is. It's a business model. So for the cartels, if you dump a bunch of kids at Eagle Pass, all of those resources for DHS have to come and work with those kids, right? Which opens up the border so they can start moving their drugs. That's the drug stuff. The smugglers will say, hey, I want $15,000. We'll get your kid into the United States. And then you really have to take it like, what happens with the kid, right? So a 4-year-old, it's just on the news, 4-year-old gets dropped at the border, gets handed off to DHS. Border Patrol takes them in. Here's the thing. They can't do anything if they claim to be under 14 years of age. They can't fingerprint. They can't question. They can't ask their name. They can't do anything. And this goes back to the whole like kids in cages under Obama, right? Like it's been happening for decades. So the Border Patrol takes these kids in and says, hey, we can't really do anything with you. The smugglers have already told these kids, don't worry, we're going to get you to Kentucky or San Diego or whatever it is. So the kids have essentially a list and says, my sponsor is in San Diego. It's in Kentucky. This is the contact. It's my abuela, whatever it is. Within 72 hours, they have to have those kids out of the cages. You know, that's just because of politics. They hand them off to a company. The largest company is MVM. MVM is the one where you see them in airports and they're walking around with all these minors and people say, who do you work for? What do you do? And they refuse to tell them. They don't have to. It's
those guys that you've seen in the airport with the manila envelopes, that's MVM. The people that you saw at that New York airport in the middle of the night saying if anybody knew what we were doing here, they would be fucking like furious. That's MVM as well.
Yeah. Well, and Constellas does it too.
Yeah.
I mean, Constellas does a lot of stuff with the Haitians, but we can hit that later.
Yeah.
So now MVM, dude, there was a contract that came up that said for $700 a day, can you get onto a school bus from the border at Yuma, Arizona, and drive it to like LA and San Diego? $700 a day, you get to go with these kids and these families and escort them to their next stop. Well, their next stop stops being a DHS contract. Now you're looking at Health and Human Services.
Yep.
And underneath that is an office called the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Sounds really, really nice. But these are the guys that they pay a crap ton of money, that take over hotels. They pay for all their food. I'll get them hooked up with SNAP and all the other stuff. And they're supposed to find sponsors for these families. You can't just come into the United States without a sponsor. Now, you probably heard it on the news where like the sponsor was a strip club or yeah.
Well, I mean, even for like I've talked to some whistleblowers at ORR and none of this has been made fully public yet. But I'm like, tell me the process. She goes, yeah, like 15 or so kids will show up all with the same address as their sponsor. I'm like, well, what are the chances that's real? She's like, not at all. I'm like, and you guys actually check? And she goes, well, we give them, once it's established that there's a sponsor, we hand them over to MVM, and they're the ones that verify whether the sponsor is legit or not. And I'm like, they're definitely not doing that. There's no fucking way that's happening.
No, and that's the thing is the smugglers will send 15 kids, give them all the same address, and then the ORR is supposed to verify it. Now they're saying MVM has to verify it. It's all a shell game so that you can't track it. But they drop them off with these sponsors, and then that's how the smugglers get them on the back end. So when you hear about a smuggler trying to extort another $5,000 from a family, or these kids that are getting lost and moved into sex trafficking or drug trafficking, that's how it's happening. The smugglers have figured out how to get the kids in through the front door of the process and out the back door of the process and still have positive control of those kids, which is kind of genius if you think about it. But at the end of the day, like, we've lost 340,000 migrant children. Like, it's bullshit. These are real humans.
Where do you think they are? I mean, so what are they doing? Are they sex trafficked? Are they fucking slaves somewhere? What the fuck's going on?
Yeah, dude, because they have to be under 14, I think you're getting a lot of guys that are in their like low 20s, early teens that are saying they're 14. So Border Patrol can't do anything with them. I would guess that 2/3 of them are going to be those kids from like 16 to 22 that are just claiming to be 14. They go out, They get through the process, they pay the smuggler, they go off and they start trying to work, whatever construction job they can under the money or under the table cash.
So it's basically like the baseball players that come from the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Albert Pujols was like 30 years old when he got here.
Yeah, well, but they're better with a hammer than they are with a bat, I guess. The problem is the smugglers, dude, if they go and they're not getting paid, that's when you have those kids that are going to be sold into sex trafficking, helping with the drug trade. Like it's insane. And what it's accomplished is with all these contracts is everybody gets to point at everybody else and say, that's not my problem. ORR is saying MVM has to do it. Dude, I think that's BS, man. Like, I can't imagine that you have MVM checking people after they drop them off at a nonprofit.
So kids come, and then there's some level of involvement from other, not from contracting companies, but from NGOs, right? Like there are quite a few. I don't think it's just Catholics, but that's the main one that I'm familiar with. Catholic organizations that are operating south of the border. When caravans come up, they're interfacing with these people, giving them phone numbers for immigration attorneys so they can make phone calls. They give them money. They give them phones. Why the fuck is the Catholic Church trying to help an invasion of America? I don't understand. What could they possibly benefit from this, aside from the fact that those people are Catholics?
Well, it's either they drop them off at the U.S.-Mexico border or at the Vatican, and they don't want them in the Vatican.
Sure,
I promise that. With they're nice tapestries. Yeah, so those NGOs, dude, one of them is a big one's called Act Blue. And there are signs on the U.S.-Mexico border that tell these people when they get close to the border to throw away all their documentation. Throw away your passport, throw away your driver's license, because then you're starting with a clean slate. You and I grew up with a social security number, a birth certificate. We have, a credit score, all this other garbage. These guys show up without any of that stuff. And then DHS or the nonprofit or MVM is supposed to somehow go through the process of identifying who these people are. And they just can't. So the NGOs are like the scummiest part of it, man.
That's, my God. I mean, you would think at some point that, one, we would stop the faucet on these because the U.S. government is funding this, right? You would think we would at least turn off the money, but also there's got to be much harsher penalties. I think I think the Catholic Church as it is needs to have their tax exempt status removed entirely because of this is criminal what they're doing. It's not a matter of ethics or not. It's literally illegal what they're doing, right? And it's just being allowed to happen.
Well, dude, the Catholic Church has been anti birth control for since it started. And the reason is the more kids you birth into the Catholic Church, the more people that you're going to have, the more people that are going to give money. Dude, that spigot's starting to run dry. And my assumption is now the Catholic Church is saying, how the heck do we make money to be able to, to sweep all this sex stuff underneath the rug for the next 20 years? I honestly think, dude, it's anybody that worked in the contracting field and doesn't tell you that it was a money grab is a liar, right? And that's what it is. So you're having the Catholic Church, you have Southwest Keys that is under the Department of Justice, just sued them for sexually assaulting minors. You have all these places that are just fly-by-night LLCs that go and rent out a Motel 8, and then they use that as immigrant housing. Dude, it's all a cash grab. And anybody that says they're trying to help is full of shit.
Yeah, so you talked about Southwest Keys being sued again, by the way, for assaulting minors. They had, it was in their Phoenix chapter in 2015, I think. This dude, one of the dudes that worked there was HIV positive, and he raped like 8 little boys. I don't know if he transmitted to all of them or not, but that dude went to prison, and the organization discontinues. And I've done this on my previous show before, gone through the paces on this stuff about what Southwest Keys does specifically. But it is just it's very clearly a giant money laundering organization. I've never seen anything like it before. They have
where they have 29 different locations across like Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California. Like
they're all over the place.
Big.
So they have there's a limit. For those that don't know, there's a limit on how much the C-suite people at a nonprofit can make. Right? It's commensurate with whatever the Senate salaries. I think what is that, 174 right now or something like that. Maybe it's 194. I don't remember, but basically, you can only pay yourself X amount of dollars. So what this Southwest Key programs and other NGOs do is they will take money from the company. They'll take money out, use it as a down payment on properties, right? And they'll buy the property, and then they'll sell the property to their own personal LLCs. This is what Southwest Key did. They sold it to their own LLCs, and then they rent it out. They rent it back to Southwest Key programs from these like just fucking shell companies at somewhere between a 6 and 10x markup, right? So if the rent would have been $10,000 a month for one of these medium-sized facilities, they're charging somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 a month rent, and all that money comes from inside the NGO, right? It's the government paying for that. It's tax dollars.
It's my money, goddamn it.
Yeah, it's like it is the most efficient and out in the open money laundering scheme I've ever seen in my life, and people keep writing about it, and nobody fucking does anything to stop it. It is wild to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of hope that if you turn off the spigot at the border, that kind of reduces. But then again, dude, that's what I thought about Afghanistan and Iraq with private military contractors. Like they're gonna find another way to spend that money, and the companies are gonna be able to find a way to say, hey, this is the service for it. I mean, dude, you're looking at, I think they were renting out rooms for it, like Motel 8 for $2,200 a month. Like that's insane.
Yeah, they're like $500 a month.
It's crazy.
Or 500, $500 a month, something like that. It's crazy. Let me see if I can find this actually.
So the other thing, if you guys are listening, just go in and type in MVM and then DHS contract. It'll show you all the millions of dollars that are going to MVM. Triple canopy, same thing. You can also do HHS contracts, Southwest Keys, HHS or ORR, and it's all open source. This is the craziest part. Is I'm not telling you anything because somebody, a secret squirrel NSA person told me. Like, it's all open source. You saw the 4-year-old get dropped at the border. You hear about the 340,000 kids that had been lost by DHS and HHS. You see these guys walking through the airport. It's all open, and nobody has the balls to sit there and call it out. That's the biggest concern.
Yeah, and they do. Southwest Key specifically does something that a lot of nonprofit organizations do, which is set up satellite companies that are for profit that service the nonprofit, right? And that's not intrinsically bad. Like if you're a nonprofit that provides food to people, for example, like let's say Meals on Wheels, you're a nonprofit, Meals on Wheels, and you're one of the executives at Meals on Wheels, and you have a company that does food production, and you're making good food at a reasonable price and selling to that company. I don't have a problem with that, right? That's fine. Do that. As a matter of fact, it's smart to do that, right? That's if we're going to spend the money on it as a community, and it's donor money, somebody's got to make the food. Who cares if it's you or not? But that's not what Southwest Key does. I mean, they fucking inflate. It operates more like a PMC than anything, right? Just tacking on another 40% tax for no reason to every single thing they sell.
Yeah, well, dude, and if you control the entire supply chain for an independent company like Black Rifle or Hard AF Cider, I don't know, but
Seltzer, yeah.
Like you want to be able to own that supply chain because you can reduce your costs, and at the end of the day, you have more profit at the end.
And more profit means more people that you can help. By the way, if you're thinking of it that way.
Yeah, dude, I mean, profit's not inherently a bad thing, but when you start owning the supply chain, we saw this with Blackwater, dude. We got there to Blackwater, they gave us gear, it was all 511 gear. And then Blackwater started coming out with their own kit. It wasn't as good a kit as like the Blackhawk stuff that we all bought off. But Blackwater had the ability to say, hey, we got to give these guys their pants and their kit and everything else. Why not get into the manufacturing of that so that we can squeeze another 2, 3, 4% out of this stuff? And that's what Southwest Keys is doing, is they're saying, hey, we can feed all these guys for, let's call it $20 a day. And if we can get that down to $2 a day, it's $18 in profit under a non-profit that we don't really even have to claim. Like it's scumbaggery.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's like I'm looking at this New York Times article now. The guy who started it, Sanchez, this is Southwest Key Programs. He built a shelter operation on a network of real estate investors. So he had this group of people who also, some of them are on the board of Southwest Key Programs, who are real estate investors, and they would go out. They would use loans from the NGO to buy the business, and they would pay back the loan interest-free after they bought the building or whatever it was. And then they were renting the building back. So in one case, Southwest Key paid $117,000 a month for a building in Mesa, Arizona, where the previous renter had, like, we're talking about 2 months prior, had advertised a rate of $30,000 a month. So they went from $30,000 to $117,000 a month. Now, where do you think the extra money went to? I'm sure it went to some noble cause, right?
Yeah, dude, I'm sure they went out there and helped the homeless in Mesa, Arizona, which Mesa is a dump. Like it is, really is. But no, dude, this is the problem with government contracting, and we saw the same thing with KBR when we went into Iraq. I don't know how the contract is set up, but there's a lot of cost plus contracting. So the more they can spend, the more they make. So if you can spend an extra $5 on, you spend an extra $140,000 on your rent, and the government's reimbursing you at like 1.1% or a multiple of 1.1. Then you're making $17,000 right on top of that. It's free. It's free money. It's a cash grab.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild, man. So I'm looking at a diagram of it now. Southwest Key loaned $4.5 million to buy buildings to Chakbak, which is their fucking LLC. That's a real estate LLC. It's CHACBAK. And then they loaned him another $1.5 million to remodel the places. So in total, $6 million came out of Southwest Key, which is taxpayer funds, right? They bought the buildings using the loan, an interest-free loan from the taxpayers, and then rent the building back to fucking Southwest Key at 4 or 5 times the rate that you would normally do it. How is nobody in fucking jail for this? I mean, this is clearly money laundering.
Well, so I've worked in corporate America for a while, and it's not abnormal for somebody like a corporation to buy a building, you depreciate it over the course of 7 years, and then you sell that building to somebody else, and then you rent back the space from them because you've already depreciated. You can't get any more tax write-offs on it. So it's not that it's unheard of; it's the scale and the quickness that they're actually being able to do this. They got to be running afoul of the law somewhere. And I'm sure they have the best tax attorneys on the planet. You have to if you're running something like this.
Yeah.
But somebody needs to take a look at this and say, dude, we're facilitating literally the dredges of humanity selling kids. And these guys are just making millions and millions off it.
Never let a tragedy go to waste, I suppose. And then there's, I don't know if you saw it this week, but Catholic Charities USA, this fat lady it's an old white or like a middle-aged white woman who's everything bad that happens in the world now is mostly them. It's either them or ISIS, right? So she goes on and look, say what you want about it. I don't think she did anything illegal, but she's trying to tell. She made a video coaching illegal immigrants on how to avoid getting arrested, how to avoid this and avoid that. It's like what the fuck are you doing here? You know what I mean? Like I don't understand how this doesn't run. I don't think it's illegal, but it should certainly put their tax exempt status in question because it's owned. This charity is owned by the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, which means it's owned by the Vatican, right? If it's owned by an archdiocese, that means it's owned by the Vatican. This is directly back to Rome, which, by the way, as the Pope is criticizing us for locking down our borders, I don't recall him opening the gates to the Vatican at all. And I don't anticipate he will either. I think, I don't know if you'll recall, we sent a bunch of illegals from Texas and Florida up to Martha's Vineyard and DC and shit. Maybe we should send some to the fucking Vatican and see how they like that.
Yeah, dude, I went to the Vatican and it took me like 2 months to get a paper ticket to be able to walk in. So yeah, dude, a lot of these guys are sitting on their high horse. So, dude, in the Democratic Party is the worst about it. Act Blue is another one that's saying, here's how you avoid ICE. You don't have to talk to DHS. If they don't have a warrant, they can't come into your house. Dude, they're just delaying the inevitable at this point. Because if you're too afraid to go out as an illegal immigrant, to go out and actually get a job, and nobody's paying your rent for you, sooner or later, you're either going to get caught because you got to go to work, or you're going to sit there in your house and just, hope for the next 20, 30, 40 years. I don't know what their end game is. I know what their short game is. We're making a ton of money, and we're bringing in all those cute little boys into the church, since nobody wants to be an altar boy anymore. But it is absolutely just a cash grab. And the PMCs are probably, I would say, margins, because PMCs are literally just moving people, right? If you're paying somebody $700 a day to go on a school bus, you're probably making somewhere between $2,100 and $2,500 for that person to sit on a school bus, right? God, imagine that smell. You're like sitting there with a bunch of migrants. You're on a school bus. There's no AC. You're just rocking and rolling down the I-10.
It's not worth $700 a day, to be honest. I would need quite a bit more money than that. Just yesterday, actually, 24 Chinese illegals were rounded up in a human trafficking bust in Coral Gables in Florida. They were heading to Orlando. They arrested 4 of the people on conspiracy to transport illegals. I don't know if they were U.S. citizens or not, which, there's plenty of blame to go around here. The vast majority of fentanyl that gets moved across our border is by American citizens. And we can get to that later, too. I think personally that we should invade Mexico and set up a 10 to 15 mile DMZ and shoot anybody that walks into it. 300 or so thousand of our citizens are dead from fentanyl overdoses, more than has died in any war except for World War II and our own Civil War, right? Like, fuck these people. The government down there is completely complicit. They had to kill 38 people to put this stupid bitch in power, this commie, right? It's like, no, they've declared war on us already. We got to fuck these people up. But it's not just Mexico, and it's not just illegals that are doing this. There are quite a few American citizens that are involved in this as well.
Oh, dude, if there's money to be made, somebody's gonna put their hat in the ring, right? Like, when I started working for Blackwater, it was $550 a day. By the time like 5 years hit, people were going over there risking their lives for like $200 a day. So it really is. If there's money, somebody's going to go and do it. But what you're talking about is creating Camp Brown Cloud, Camp Red Cloud in Korea, South and North. Camp Brown Cloud would be perfect, dude. You just set up a nice DMZ. I mean, I'm not into the firing on people as much, but that's a young man's game. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I see myself as a young man then in that context, because fuck these people, stay out of my goddamn country. So let's go back to this portal that we've created, and it's our own doing, right? You can't have an open border, but also pretend at securing it at the same time, because what you do is you create a professional smuggling class, right? And what they do is they bring drugs and human trafficking people and terrorists over the border, right? It's always a huge mistake to do it. You either have to lock it down the way that Spain did with the Moroccan border, right? Just lock it down, put military on the border and face guns south, or you have to have like extremely good relations with the other country, and both of you do illegal and criminal interdiction, like as partners. That's the only two ways it could possibly work. The way we've done it over the past, since NAFTA, really, NAFTA precipitated a lot of this shit, has been completely retarded. It's like the times where we don't have mass influxes of illegal immigration is just a coincidence at this point, right? It's just like, there's nobody was motivated to come during that time period, or when Trump actually locked stuff down. that was helpful too. And then Obama he was the deporter in chief. He deported more people than all previous presidents combined in the history of the country, right? So we've set up this system where if it isn't, and this isn't necessarily a great thing, by the way. We've set up this system where if you aren't constantly vigilant, then it's going to get out of control in a very short amount of time. And that's certainly, we should be constantly vigilant either way. But the fact that you can't take your foot off the gas at any point without it going completely tits up shows how fucked up our system is.
So the other thing that you're saying is that the money for these migrants. Okay, so let's go back to like the 80s, right? So you used to have all these migrants. They would come in, they would work, they would send their money back to the U.S., right? And then you had like compassionate immigration under George W. Bush, where a lot of people would go and they would work, send money back to Mexico. Mexico's entire economy is based on people that work in the U.S. and move their money back to their family, or drugs. So the easiest way to move drugs, and I saw this after 2001. So let me digress a little. So 2001 hit, September 11th, we took all of our air assets and we started moving them overseas to Afghanistan, to Saudi Arabia, to Kuwait, all these places. The drug dealers at that point were like, bro, they don't have nearly as many assets. Let's move all of the drugs we possibly can from South America up to Mexico. There's the ABC Islands, Aruba, Curacao. I don't remember what the B is. But dude, they were like big drug smuggling islands. And they essentially just staged their drugs there, knowing that at some point the U.S. military was going to divert planes back. But if they had enough drugs close to the border, they could kind of overwhelm it. That's the same thing you're seeing in Mexico, right? When you could take a drone and see that there's a caravan with 80,000 people that are like bebopping from South America up through Mexico, and it's not ever being stopped, there's a reason for that. And it's because the Mexican government wants them to be able to move up to the border, overwhelm the actual border patrol. And that allows the cartels to run carte blanche, man. Like, if you have all your border patrol dudes hanging out at Eagle Pass, just walk 3 miles east or west, and you could probably get as many drugs through as you possibly want.
Oh, my God. I mean, it always does at some point or another come down to money. And regardless of what the business people, cartels, and politicians in Mexico want, this kind of stuff can only happen if American politicians and business people are involved as well. We've seen little bits and pieces of this. Certainly there's some people in the state legislature in Arizona that are guilty of this, and it's been pretty well documented. Actually, nobody's made a move on them yet for some reason. A bunch of real estate scams to wash cartel money that starts in Arizona and makes its way all the way up to like Indiana and shit, into the like red Midwest, which is very interesting to me. But yeah, it's at some point it always comes down to who's making money off of this shit. And for some reason, and I don't personally understand it. Everybody's got a price, I guess, right? And you would think it would be higher. You really would think, for a person with a family and shit like that has responsibilities, that the price of their soul, for lack of a better phrase, would be quite a bit higher than the pittance that they're getting from literally sending people to live horrible lives, right? I'm talking about the human trafficking element especially, but also the resulting fentanyl deaths, right? It's like, your people are dying so you can make a couple $1,000 extra a month. Are you out of your fucking mind? Like, how I don't understand how people can even think that way.
Well, dude, you gotta take the morality out of it, and you have to look at these smuggling rings and these drug cartels. They are a business. Now, dude, their profits are spectacular, don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, they're run like a business. They know what they have in inventory. They know what's moving forward. I guarantee they have a shrinkage rate that says, hey, we're going to have 8% of this be interdicted. Like, they know the cash in, cash out stuff. So if you pull out the morality stuff, look, they're running a really successful business. Where you can't take out the morality stuff is, I think, with the nonprofits and the private military contractors. You're outsourcing morality. You are taking something that should be done by a government, outsourcing the morality of that to a private company that doesn't have any checks and balances to it. And that's why you have all those Haitians that are going up to Ohio and eating the cats and dogs and shit, man. Is we have facilitated the process, and you just barely started hearing about this when Trump got in, the secret flights. You can look it up right now, dude. It's Triple Canopy. It's in Haiti. Look up Triple Canopy Guantanamo Bay contract. What they're doing is they're sending people to Haiti. They're collecting these individuals that are, seeking asylum from Haiti. They're moving them to Guantanamo Bay. They're literally moving them to the place that we've been talking about closing down for like the last 2 decades. That's where they're doing their screening. Then they have their sponsor, right? That's where it's a strip club. It's a freaking storage unit. They send them into Ohio, and the nonprofit says, "Oh yeah, that strip club, that's going to take these, 4,000 or 5,000 Haitians," and then they get released into the ether, man. And then they start chowing down the cats and dogs.
Triple Canopy Inc. was awarded an Oasis Pool 1 unrestricted contract for Naval Station Guantanamo Bay on April 1st, 2021. Oasis is a program that provides professional services to government agencies. That sounds totally normal, doesn't it? $41.3 million on this one fixed price contract to move immigrants through Guantanamo Bay.
Dude, it's insane. I was trying to figure out, how are these guys getting from Haiti to like Florida? Are they jumping on canoes and shit? No, dude, we are making it that easy. You're literally flying them to Gitmo. And then if you go on MVM's website, I don't know if they changed it, because I finally got a media person to start reaching out. But they have like youth care coordinator is one of their jobs. And it's like, duties include setting up car seats, being like, dude, all the stuff where you're like, dude, you're just moving migrant kids. Like, you're just trafficking children.
Yeah, you're trafficking kids, man. And it would be one thing. I wouldn't consider it trafficking if they were actually going to link up with a relative. It's still unethical to like let people come into the country that don't belong here. But if they were going to an actual relative, like an aunt or uncle or grandparent or something like that, all right, at least the kid isn't fucking in trouble. You know what I mean? But we don't know any of this. There's no way that 15 to 25 people that are going to some fucking strip mall address, right? That nobody, you looked at the address, all you got to do is put it in Google. Put it in Google and it'll fucking show you a picture of what it is. Is it a house? Or is it a fucking a unit inside of a giant strip mall? If it's that, who the fuck lives there? You know what I mean? Like, they're literally trafficking children. I just don't know any other way to put that.
No, I mean, everybody justifies what they do. I justify working for Blackwater and what we did and try to find the good stuff that we did. But at the same time, dude, it's straight up like, I could never take this job from a moral standpoint of being like, yeah, I just picked up 8 7-year-old girls and I dropped them off at the outside of a strip club and I don't know what happened to them. Like, dude, at some point you have to just look at yourself in the mirror. And I don't know how these guys are doing it, man.
You know what's really... Go ahead.
Here's the beauty of it, right? So the contract is obtained by Constellus, which owns Triple Canopy, which then subcontracts down to some no-name LLC. And then none of these guys have to actually open their books for anybody because they're private companies. And that's how the government is getting away with it. The government has obscured it to the point that they don't have to open up their books. DHS would have to do it. ORR would have to do it. But, dude, like, Triple Canopy is not opening up their books. That's why when they see people in the airport and they say, "Who are you?" and they flip their name badge over, they don't have to tell them.
In August of 2024, the Biden administration granted a private prison company $163.4 million to run the Migrant Operations Center at Guantanamo Bay. So we're paying a private prison company. This isn't like when people hear, even from the Trump administration, that we're going to send the worst of the worst people down to Gitmo, they think that it's soldiers or Marines, right? They think that it's Navy, but it's not. It's a private prison company, just like we have here in America, right? Just like we have here in America. And by the way, these private prison companies that exist in the U.S., both state and federal, have contracts with the government where they have to keep a certain amount of beds filled. Otherwise, they have to pay a penalty for that, which means the government, the state and federal governments are on the hook to imprison a certain amount of people. There's a quota for how many American citizens they have to put in prison, which explains why we've been putting people in prison for nonviolent drug crimes for years, right? Because you have to. It makes money. So you make money on the drugs coming in. You make money on laundering the drugs and all the kickbacks that come from that. And then you make money again putting people in prison for the thing that you allowed. That's what we're seeing right now in the United States.
Dude, it's like that Always Funny or Always Sunny in Philadelphia thing where the guy's like conspiracy theory and all the strings are going around on his whiteboard.
Pepe Sylvia, yeah.
But dude, it's straight up that, like, it is that complex. And all it does is it allows the government, the agencies, the politicians to sit there and say, it wasn't us, it was Triple Canopy or is MVM. And dude, this happened. This started in 2004 with Blackwater and Triple Canopy when the Blackwater guys got hanged off the bridge in Fallujah. Dude, they said, oh, that was Blackwater's fault. Yeah, but who was contracting them? It was DOD. The Blackwater guys in Nisser Square 07. Oh, that was Blackwater's fault. It has become really effective to be able to shift that culpability that there's no reason why anybody would want to change it.
Yeah. Well, here's a good example of this, a very specific example of why nobody would in the private or public sector would want to change this. From December of 21 to December of 22, the MOC, the migrant holding facility, held an average monthly population of 14 undetermined migrants. 14. That's the same company that 2 years later got a $163 million contract. Like, how much money does it take to look after 14 people? Exactly, right? That's like a big fucking extended Catholic family or Mormon.
I was gonna say that's like the Duggars, bro.
Yeah. That's just a Mormon family. And I guarantee you, they're not making 163 mil a year. Not with 3 wives, anyways. That's why. I mean, it's just money, and they don't care if people are getting hurt or killed or any of that shit. All they care about is the money. It's fucking wild. I've never seen. This is the biggest scandal that's going on in America right now. And fucking like 3 people are talking about it. You don't hear any of this shit on mainstream media ever. Not even in the independent media stuff. I think Sean Ryan has talked about it a little bit, but I haven't heard Tucker talking about it or any of these other big people.
Dude, the only place that would publish my article was like Real Clear Defense when I started talking about it, because it has something to do with PMCs, which is defense related. But I can't. I've reached out to the New York Post. I've reached out to everybody because I have sources down at the border because I live in Arizona. Like, I have the ability to sit there and go through the entire chain of custody of a single migrant child, and nobody wants to run with it. Dude, maybe it's because it's happened since George W. Bush really started the contracting thing in earnest in 01, 02, right? Rumsfeld started the whole, we can make our military more lean. And then last you heard in Iraq, we have something like 20,000 contractors and 3,000 soldiers that are over there. Like, dude, it's become its own military force.
Yeah.
It's how we're going to get dragged into World War III, dude. These guys in Gaza are going to get strung up, or the guys in Ukraine are going to get strung up. And the U.S. is going to say, same thing they did in Fallujah 03. We got to go take that. Or Fallujah 04. We got to go take that. And then we're going to get dragged into a war because nobody has the balls to put boots on the ground. They just want to use contractors.
Yeah, I mean, and to that point, it matters that war sucks, right? It's supposed to suck. And when it doesn't, people will do it more. And for no reason. And this is what Eisenhower warned about in all of these ways. I mean, he talked mostly about the military-industrial complex. I don't know that he could have imagined that that U.S. security would have extended to this illegal immigration trafficking program as well. I don't think he could have imagined that in the 1950s, to be honest. I mean, it's wild how much. And look, all government eventually becomes an engine to siphon off labor and wealth from the population. That's what government is, right? That's why we wrote a constitution to try to make it as small and ineffectual as possible. But it has not worked, right? I love the Constitution as much as anybody else, but it has not worked so far. Well, like there's something has to be done about this. at some point, like these people that are in power, these bureaucrats that stay in office for 40 and 50 years at a time, unelected and elected people. Our system of government has to change, or otherwise it's going to fucking crumble.
Well, what we did is we cracked it open with Iraq, right? Afghanistan only had 16,000 troops in it. We opened it up with Iraq, and then, dude, I could pontificate for hours on why we had to use private military contractors and not soldiers over there. But it has everything to do with bad war planning. Shock right there. And then when Katrina hit in 2004, they opened up that door for the internal stuff, FEMA, right? So Blackwater was helping in Katrina under FEMA contracts. And then they've just slowly gotten their foot into the point now that it's permeating everything. You have private military contractors at federal buildings. Remember the riots in like 2020? Ton of private military contracting jobs, because what they did is they took the federal agents and they started swarming them to like federal buildings. And then who took over for those federal agents? Contractors. Mm-hmm. And the whole concept of contracting is you do it when you need them and then you downsize. That just shows me that in the last 20 years, there's never been a conscious effort by the government to say, we need this many people. We have to hire them. We have to train them. We have to do it.
Yeah.
That's where it's easy, dude.
That's what a 1099 is supposed to be. Right?
Right.
It's supposed to be, I need some quick help. And there's very specific rules on what it can be. For the government doesn't play by any of these rules, by the way. So as an organization, and even if you took it down to the agency level, like the lower level, the agency or department level, federal law requires that if you hire a 1099, one, they can't have set work hours. They can't have, there's certain specific mission goals you can give them. But it's like there's a prescription for that as well. And you can't have another person working at your company that does the same thing that contractor does, right? Those are the rules for the private sector. For the government, they hire. When's the last time you heard about a mass firing of contractors that are no longer necessary? No, they just keep piling on, or they convert them into full-time employees, right? It's fucking crazy. And it's why do you remember the last time the Department of Defense passed an audit?
Dude, I don't think they ever have.
2000.
Well, that was before the war, so that actually makes sense. Yep. Yeah.
It's been 25 fucking years since the largest expenditure on our budget has passed an audit.
Well, dude, and the contractors, like 13 hours, that whole Benghazi thing, those guys were contractors. Like we're consistently taking contractors instead of boots on the ground, getting closer to the front line, and then being outraged when something bad happens.
Yeah. Yeah, we're dumb as shit. So do you see any light at the end of the tunnel for this? Is there anybody other than you and me even talking about this shit, to be honest? Because I don't ever hear anybody talking about it.
It's starting to get more traction, right? Like you're starting to see it in the Senate. You're talking about like J.D. Vance brought up the $100 million that the Catholic charities are using. So it's starting to get that traction. The shocking thing is that we're probably 4 years. I mean, you've been talking about it for at least 3. I've been talking about it for pushing 2. And it's barely getting traction, but it's still not showing the supply chain like I was just able to sit here and talk to you about and be able to say, this is actually how it's happening. Here's who's profiting. So if the spigot gets turned off at the U.S.-Mexico border, I think that would almost be worse, wouldn't it? Because it'll never come to light.
Yeah, I mean, everybody will just keep their money and go to the next, whatever the next thing is, or they'll wait for people to forget and they'll start it up again, right? Which is kind of how that works. We'll see. I'm not going to stop talking about it. And also, send me that article. I might be able to get it published in Newsweek. We'll see.
Okay, I'll shoot it off your way, man.
I'll give him a good effort there. Now, we've talked about all that. Also, while you're here, let's promote your book. Tell me about Guns, Girls, and Greed for people that haven't heard about it before.
Dude, like if you want a legitimate war book, this is the legit war book. I got so tired of hearing the generals and Eric Prince and all these guys talking about the war. I want to hear the story of like the PFC that's down there kicking in a door. So that's really why I wrote the book. It's the ground perspective that always gets lost to history. And I would encourage every veteran to go and like just write something down, whether you give it to your family or whether you publish a book. But the book's called Guns, Girls, and Greed. I was a Blackwater mercenary in Iraq. It's got audio out there because I know the Drinking Bros cast is not the biggest readers, me included. But go check it out, dude. Everybody that's read it, if you have a friend in the military, you were in a frat, like you realize that it's just young kids doing crazy shit.
Yeah, it's wild, man. To think about, in Mexico, maybe finding this out pretty soon, actually, a bunch of pissed off 19-year-old paratroopers can do quite a bit of damage. It's insane how much. And look, it used to be even crazier than that. Back in the day, it was 14 to 16-year-olds that were privates in the military, right? Like during the revolutionary periods. Like you think about it now, like, holy shit. But now with the structure of our military, I mean, I was in my mid-20s as a rear detachment commander because I was getting out and everybody else deployed to Haiti, and I signed like a $30 million property book. I'm like, I don't need to be here, dude. What the fuck is going on? It's wild how much of that stuff's going on. And then I think there might be some challenges coming. You probably remember this just historically. You're not old enough to have experienced it, but back in the day when you were a service member, you could drink on post. You couldn't drink off post, but if you were 18 to 20, you could drink on post. That was like literally, it was legal. For like it wasn't it wasn't an exception that the military made. It was federally legal for that to happen, right? Now that's obviously not the case. Yeah, I mean, it was
sounds cool.
I think they got rid of it in the mid 80s sometimes, and it was probably because everybody was in garrison all the time. There was no war, so people were just fucking shit faced all the time. But this week, Firearm Policy Coalition settled a case with the Fifth Circuit that overturns the federal ban on handgun purchases for 18 to 20-year-olds, which is completely unconstitutional anyways, right? An adult is an adult, right? Now, I think the next step, and this, if you like a book like Girls, Guns, and Greed, if you like partying and shit like that, and you're a young person, this may speak to you. Drink, like the production, sale, and consumption of alcohol is a constitutionally guaranteed right now, right? It wasn't originally, but they did it when they started prohibition and then repealed it with the 21st Amendment. The 21st Amendment makes all of these things a constitutionally guaranteed right, which means with this new case law, somebody in the 18 to 20-year-old bracket could certainly sue the federal government for making it illegal to drink at 18 to 20. And I think they would win now.
Oh, dude, they absolutely could. The crazy part is that at 16, they'll give you a car that you can literally run over people in Louisiana on New Year's Day, but you can't drink or you can't own a firearm. That's ridiculous, dude.
No, it's pretty silly, but you know, what are you going to do? Life is silly these days, to be honest. I think everybody's just lost their fucking mind. I do genuinely believe we live in the dumbest period in human history. Just seeing like people's brains are broken. I don't know if it's a combination of the physiological damage we've done with hormones and like heavy metals and stuff like that to our bodies, or if people are just fucking dumb. I don't know. Maybe it's because the process of learning a new skill doesn't exist anymore. You just look it up. Like that process just doesn't exist anymore. Maybe it's part of that. But people who can if somebody can trick you in a 30-second video and you don't have like the general common sense to go verify what's been said before you build a worldview around that, you aren't going to make it very far in life, I don't think.
Dude, there are some dumb motherfuckers out there, but I will say I think the switch happened when essentially people started looking at their political parties as their new religion. And dude, it's like the Catholic Church that wouldn't publish a Bible for ages, or the individuals over they've never read the Quran but are being told what the Quran says. It's not abnormal. It's just kind of sad that you have all that knowledge at your fingertips and you're still like, hey, I just saw a 37-second clip of Nancy Pelosi, and she's telling me that the January 6th guys all came in and killed 17 cops. It's ridiculous.
Well, the good news is the younger generation is, I wouldn't say that it would be good news that they're turning Republican, but it is good news that they're paying more attention to political stuff. Not so they can be more political, but so they can be like, oh, that's fucking dumb. That's what I hope happens. I hope that like 16 to 25-year-olds go back to not giving a shit about politics, because I didn't give a shit about politics then. Why should I care? You know what I mean? It's like I'm trying to learn how to be a human being. My brain's not fully developed yet. These people, like, there's all these like 22-year-old fucking political influencers. Like, you don't know shit. Shut the fuck up. You've never had a real job before. Being an influencer because you're screaming into your fucking camera on the internet is not a real job. Go get a real job for like 10 years and you come back and talk some shit. I'll listen to you then for sure. But for now,
yeah, hopefully, like generation beta will be the common sense generation. At least, dude, you hit it. Like, we're starting to see that people are getting away from politics and going towards common sense. The younger 18 to 24-year-old crowd. So, dude, there's hope out there. Every generation thinks the next one's all fucked up, right? World War II thought the Vietnam guys were pussies. The Vietnam guys thought the GWAT guys were pussies. You know, the next war, the GWAT guys are going to be like, oh, you guys are pussies. You guys just fly drones and shit. So there's still hope. There's still some war fighters out there.
We'll see how it goes. I have hope, too. We got to get out of here. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Yep. Track me down on Instagram, X, TikTok. It's just at Blackwater Dude, and the number 1 at Blackwater Dude 1. And then books on Amazon. Check it out.
Yep. All right. Thanks for coming today, man. I appreciate your time.
Yep. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. And thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.